Good morning, Tiffy. Good
Good,
morning, everyone.
good morning, Yo-Yo. Good morning, MBE community.
Welcome, welcome, welcome. Mind
hmm
Body Energy Project Take 500.
Not quite yet, but
No,
maybe
not quite
at
yet.
some point. We're planning
Yeah,
on it.
I think we're around like 30 episodes, somewhere
Yeah,
in
that
that
sounds about
arena,
right.
which
hmm
is, high five.
Yeah, yeah.
Thank you for being here with us. And
hmm
it's been fun, these conversations that we've had. And today, our topic was actually requested by one of our community members, Joe. I got it, Joe. So we're going to talk about yoga today. And one of the first things before we get into the topic of what we're going to talk about, I just wanted to ask you, honey, how did you get into yoga, and how did you even end up adding that into your
Uh,
life?
well, I got into yoga because I've been an athlete my whole life, and I was an athlete and then a gym rat and then a personal trainer. And then I got to the point where I was like, I should really stretch. Like stretching, I don't want to do it. So I found myself in a Bikram yoga class, and um, I was learning about managing my body in a different way, and then also stretching, which I hadn't really ever been taught or really learned well through other things that I had done. And then I realized how important it was. But as I grew through that practice, it brought me on this crazy journey of really understanding what yoga actually is, because it's not just stretching. But that's where I started. And I started with the mentality of, oh yeah, let me go into that really hot room where I'm going to stretch and it'll make my muscles stretch even better. And even that idea is kind of false as well. So what my original idea was landed me in a very profound existence of understanding yoga.
Very cool. It's
hmm
funny. I always think of, when people ask me about yoga, I think of what got me into yoga teacher training. But actually, my first experience with yoga was Bikram as well. So it's kind of funny. But what was going on for me at the time is I used to take belly dancing classes, and my belly dancing teacher, my first belly dancing teacher, used to recommend that we take yoga for, because it would complement your dancing. And at the time, I was in a really stressful relationship. And so just one day I thought, you know what, I'm going to try this yoga stuff. But I thought, I really was, I think it was to get out of the house. I just wanted to go do something. And it seemed like something useful to do. But I had no expectation or anything about, I didn't know anything about it. And Bikram was the first one that I found. There was a yoga studio where they taught Bikram. However, this particular studio was different than what you typically hear about Bikram, because they didn't yell in a megaphone, or they weren't really the owners of the studio. They were surfers and super chill, super nice, beautiful community. And I loved it. One, because sweating all that out and just the heat of that room, at the time it felt like I was detoxing every day
Yeah.
of the stress that I was holding around this relationship. So it was like the best way to end every single day. I just felt like I got to let it all out. But
Yeah.
I also liked back then that there was a sequence, because I could kind
hmm
of track my progression, because you do
Yeah.
the same thing every time. So it was I did it every single day, Monday through Sunday, for 6 months. And
Ooh, that is dedication.
yeah, but I mean, I fell in love with it. And
Yeah.
then I stopped and I didn't do yoga for years. And then once I got into energy work, one time I was in a meditation and I heard, like, go to yoga teacher training. I was like, what? I don't want to be a yoga teacher. But anyway, I got this whole message about going to yoga teacher training to learn about the breath and the importance of the breath. I was like,
hmm
that's kind of expensive way
Yeah.
to learn about the breath, but whatever. I found a yoga school that um, was really cool. They were pretty. It wasn't just um,
You went to Soul of Yoga, right?
yeah, it wasn't just
Yeah.
like a workout place of yoga. They really
Yeah.
brought in the spiritual aspects and focused on it. Was hatha yoga, so they focused on the 8 limbs and all of this. So I ended up doing that, and it was amazing. I
Yeah.
won't get into that now, but it was amazing. So one thing I will say though, what I learned after that is that yoga really, to me, is like another tool for transformation.
Yeah, for sure. I similarly, I did not plan on doing yoga teacher training. I had no interest in being a yoga teacher. In fact, I had my experience with yoga, not just Bikram, but I had like touched on a little bit of vinyasa here and there. And my experience with some like teachers I had met didn't feel aligned with what I know some of the teachings were, and just other other research I had done on the whole concept of yoga. So I was just like, I don't want to be another fish in the giant water of saturated industry. Like, no, thank you. Um, but because I'm a personal trainer, I have to do continuing education credits, and I've been certified for so long that I've done a lot of the courses that the company I'm certified through offers. So yoga teacher training was a way for me to get those continuing education credits, but also like improve my own personal practice. So that's why I did it. And then my friends were asking me to teach them. These are friends who were not into yoga, just whatever. They were just like, where have you been for 5 months? We haven't seen you. Teach us what you're doing. So I did a free class that summer, all summer on the bay, and they kept coming back, like people who I didn't expect to ever to step foot in a yoga studio kept coming back. And so I did it for 3 more years following that. And so for me to see that people coming for a different reason than I had started, or a different reason than I had thought I would want to teach, I was like, there's something to this.
Yeah.
So it's cool to see people getting something out of it that you hadn't expected.
Well, since you said that too, I mean, I could think one of the things we should probably say from the start, because for some people, yoga is just, they think it's just a thing of doing postures, and which is called the asanas. And there are different types of yoga out there. So,
Yes,
just two of
tons
the
of different
main
types.
ones that you mentioned in what you just said, I just want to point out for people. So, like hatha yoga, for example, the yoga that I studied, or that I did yoga teacher training for, it's more about breathing through the postures. Like, so you like hold a posture, and like you hold, like you do several breaths within a posture. And then, of course, like I said, there's also the other aspects that are highlighted, like the Eightfold Path and the Eight Limbs of Yoga, which we'll talk about. But the difference between hatha and vinyasa is more of a flow. So it's like you're kind of like moving more quickly through the postures, and there's more of like a flow element to it versus like a holding and breathing. So if you're wondering about that, but there's like so
Tons.
many kinds of
Yeah.
yoga.
I'm going to throw Bhima Shakti out there because it's my new favorite type of yoga. It's not well known, but I
Yeah.
also studied that and am certified in that, and it's an amazing one. But yeah, there's people are out there giving different terms to different criteria of yoga that they've created. There's so many different ways, and different. If you've tried one type of yoga, try a different, because you might like one more than the other, or find that one fits your system better.
Yeah. And that's like the really cool thing about it. And a lot of yoga studios now offer various styles of yoga.
Mm-hmm.
So you can kind of, because even like
Oh yeah, yep.
Kundalini is a whole nother situation.
Yes, it is.
Kundalini
I
yoga.
love it. I love it, but it is not what we think of as quote unquote conventional yoga, at least in the Western mind.
Yeah, no. But it is, I mean, it will definitely work some stuff up and
Hmm.
out of you.
Yes, it
So
will.
you feel like you need to release or like work some stuff out, like Kundalini yoga.
Yeah.
Yeah.
First, you're gonna have to get past the weirdness of it. When you sit in a class, you're like, "What the fuck are these people doing?" Like
Yeah,
once you get
especially if
past
it's your
that,
first time. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
But yeah, there's a lot with the Kriyas and everything.
Hmm.
So, okay. So let's start with, okay, one thing I loved about Hatha, I will say, is it really was like this total life philosophy. And um, I don't even know if a lot of people, well, I guess they don't talk about it, but the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, I always say that wrong, my tongue gets tied. The Yoga Sutras, there was a lot of information. I guess this is one of the things I hope we highlight today, is that there is so much more to yoga than just the postures. While they're
Hmm.
very important and they do serve a purpose, and we'll talk about what they we're meant for as well. But it really is. It's like a system, and again, like a philosophy that helps you to live a more like full, happy, joyous, balanced,
Peaceful.
peaceful life. Yeah,
Hmm.
totally. And I think, there is a lot now in the West, it's looked at as like a form of exercise or,
Right.
maybe just stress relief, but it could be like how Reiki, I always say, is a way of life. So is yoga.
It's funny because people are always like, oh, I always feel so good after yoga. And like, I go because I'm stressed out and then I don't feel stressed anymore. And I'm sitting here like, I was so fucking stressed out in class and like afterwards. And, it's just a different mindset. It's not because I don't find it relaxing, but because I'm so focused on knowing what the philosophies are and trying to apply it, I'm seeing it from a different perspective. But maybe I should take on that. Like, let me just go and relax. Maybe I'd find something different.
Yeah, no, totally. I love it so much. Now, I mean, even talking about it, and I'm glad that we do like our Dear Diary and stuff, because that
Yeah.
means I'll commit to this week to doing some
Oh,
yoga
good.
every day.
I went this morning at 6 a.m.
I will say too, I mean, I never felt better in my life than when I was doing yoga every single day. Like
Yeah.
even before understanding like the full picture of what it is, even back
Hmm.
when I did Bikram every day, felt like amazing. And then when I did yoga teacher training, as intense as it is, never felt better in my life.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I
So
know. I
do
kind of just want to live in a yoga teacher training.
I know, honey. Woo! I wasn't expecting. People were crying on day one. I was like, whoa, what did I sign up for?
That's funny.
Oh my God. Okay. So we could use this as a way to help us transform and, help achieve inner peace. Do you want to talk about the 8 limbs?
I do. I want to touch on the sutras though, real quick, because you mentioned them. I feel like the people think of yoga and the definition to them is stretching or postures that, are either in flow of movement or holding and breathing.
I'm going to grab something while you're talking.
Okay. um, but yoga, the word is actually means unite in Sanskrit. So uniting the body and the mind, or uniting um, our humanity with our spirit self. But there is a yoga sutra in Patanjali's sutras that it says yoga is the cessation of the mind. So um, being able to unite our mind with our existence. And I'm going to clue you in real quick. What I'm talking about is the sutra where it says yoga is a cessation of the mind. So it's just stopping the mind. If we're letting our mind rule our external being and our existence versus the being in the presence of knowing that we're in this existence, because we have the mind chatter and that will create realities that might not be realities, or, something that causes us disturbance in our lives. So yoga is the cessation of all of that and just being.
Yes. No, you're saying that, hearing that just made me think of like why, again, like the 8 limbs of yoga, they kind of build you up to that. So it's
Right.
not just because I
Yeah.
think with all of this work, a lot of times we hear these things, we're like, how can I attain that? I can't. Like that's
Yeah,
like,
you can. And there's an
yeah,
outline
there's
and
an
there's a
outline
procedure to it.
and it's ongoing. I mean,
Yeah.
like you keep
Yeah.
practicing.
Because as we evolve, we take on these steps differently each time,
Mm-hmm.
and we see them from different ways. So there's 8 limbs in the pathway of yoga, of which the asanas, which are the postures we hold, are only the third. So if people are like, God, the postures are hard enough, there's more.
Let's go to the first one so they can see the buildup of
Right.
like what the
Yeah.
components are.
So the first one are the yamas, and it's moral conduct. So it's how we behave out in the world. And there's 5 different
Yamas.
pieces, 5 yamas. Yeah. Just when you thought like moral conduct of how you behave with other people and how you put yourself out in the world, there's actually 5 different underlying
Can I
pieces of
just
that.
say one thing I think is so interesting with this, because the yamas come before the niyamas. So like how we relate to others comes before how we relate to ourselves. And I think that's really interesting because like we are kind of raised that way. I mean, we are brought into like these cultures where our focus is outside before we,
For sure.
before we hit the space of like, wait, what's going on with me? So
Yeah.
it's interesting. It kind of fits the way that we're conditioned anyway, you know?
Yeah. And I think we can learn. So, well, before we won't skip ahead, but the second one are niyamas, and niyamas are personal conduct and how we take care of ourselves. So the yamas come before the niyamas, as you said, like our moral conduct, how we behave with others. But I think sometimes we learn a lot more if we're observant, or we learn a lot more about ourselves if we're watching how we interact with the world outside. And I think that's an easier way to understand ourselves, is to be in observance of how we're acting externally, and then take that and apply it internally, because it
Yeah.
gives us kind of a reflection for us to study.
So think of it this way, like, and we can say what the five yamas are. I mean, I don't really care to say them in Sanskrit. If you do, knock yourself out.
I'll do it. I'll
I
do it
don't
for
want
you.
anyone to confuse anybody. But okay, so if you think about this first, like how we relate to others, and again, thinking of these 8 limbs as like, you know, moral conduct or how to live your life in a more peaceful state. Look at the 5 elements that are just in this piece alone. Okay, go
Yeah.
ahead, Sanskrit. I'll
Okay.
do
So,
English.
okay. Okay. I'll do Sanskrit. You'll follow up with the English.
Yeah.
Okay. Ahimsa.
Non-harming.
Yes. I do we even need to go on?
I mean, right? Like, don't
Do we need to
don't
expand
harm
on that?
others. Think
Yeah.
of how much effort, though,
It takes a
it
lot
takes, because
because
I don't think we even think about how harmful we can be
yeah.
for
Yeah.
our words and actions.
Yeah. So, I mean, and even like we might think of like not physically harming people, like, oh, I don't physically harm people, but how do you use your words? Are
Yes.
your words harming people?
Mm-hmm.
Um, there's different ways of it. Is your behavior because you're projecting on other people and you're not taking account of your own personal behavior and your shit? Like you're not
Mm-hmm.
taking care of your shit. So are you projecting it on other people and harming them somehow? You might not even recognize that unless you take a look at it.
Right. Yeah, I think that is again, I mean, it's such a meaty one just alone, considering like how we may be. And I think, you know, sometimes the easier contrast to that is even thinking like, am I acting or behaving or responding from a space of love?
Hmm.
And if I'm not, then
Right.
it's the opposite. Like, what am I doing?
Right.
Okay, go ahead.
All right. Next is Satya.
Truthfulness.
That's right.
I
Yeah.
feel like we're on Sesame Street.
I know.
This is
We're
like,
like that two-headed purple monster.
yeah,
Really put the things together. Maybe we
truth.
could be that for Halloween next year. This
Yes.
year.
So remembering too that the yamas are how we are interacting with others. Truthfulness, also another one that we could spend a lifetime
Mhm.
working on, because there's so many reasons of why we often have a hard time being honest with others. Whether, you know, like we may be
Yep.
afraid of what their response will be. A
Hmm.
lot of times people aren't truthful because they're afraid like of losing someone or friendship, or, you know, just
Yeah.
all kinds of things. What comes up for you with that one?
Um, well, with that one, again, I'm coming back to why the yamas come before the niyamas, because a lot of times I think if we're in observance of why we're lying about something, it really is a reflection of like you said, for instance, if I am truthful about this, I might lose somebody, and that losing somebody is a fear response from our own behavior. And why am I afraid of losing this person? Maybe it's all these other things that I'm dealing with internally that I haven't really looked at. And it comes back down to, for that example, attachment.
Mm-hmm.
Why attachment? If we're wrestling with attachment, there's something else going on internally that isn't, it's not balanced.
It also reminds me of when I think of truthfulness or lack of it, or even being passive aggressive. I think what's interesting to me is when you think of it in terms of we're manipulating energy or trying to manipulate a situation. So a lot of times we are not direct or honest with other people because we're trying to steer things in a particular way. Like no
Yeah.
matter what it is we're trying to
Right.
steer, like you're usually making that choice because you're trying to navigate
Yeah.
or, you know, influence the situation in a particular way, which is
Right.
also something to
Yeah. And it's a
investigate.
fear response. Yeah.
Mhm.
It's a fear response, and it's controlling, and it doesn't allow things to flow as they were meant to.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Next is Asteya.
Mm-hmm. Non-stealing.
Mm-hmm. If it's not yours, don't take it.
You know, that's pretty
That's all
basic.
there is to it. Like
Yeah.
somebody else worked for it, whatever that is. Like,
And the thing is, a lot of times, this is interesting to me. Like I saw on the news or somewhere the other day, like someone, actually, I think it was a sitcom, but anyway, this man went into a grocery store and stole a roasted chicken and came out, and they like, tackled him, and he got arrested and all this stuff. And it's always interesting to me, though, the reasoning. Sometimes, people are in desperation, like,
mm-hmm.
it's important to me, I think, not to have judgment sometimes around what people, because you don't know what would cause somebody to do
Right.
such a thing. So like, while for in a personal level, it's just more of like making sure you're not stealing. And if you are in need, it's a good practice of saying, can you help me? Or can
Right.
I have? So it kind of ties into the truthfulness of, are you willing to and are you able to ask for what you need rather
Mm-hmm.
than just taking?
Which is a wonderful lesson in vulnerability,
Oh yeah.
which creates a lot of richness in life and in our experience and in our connection to everybody in this world.
Yep.
Okay, the next one is a highly debated one, I feel like, because people get all freaking weird about things. It's brahmacharya. What? It's
That's
true.
like, no, I'm just listening.
What?
So this one can relate to moderation.
Yes. But when people hear it, they only want to think of one thing and then they're like, get all up in arms about it.
Well, for me, when we talk about, because again, it's the yama. So in relation to how I am interacting with or engaging with other people, if I think about moderation, one of the first things that comes to mind for me, honestly, is like the projection of like love and emotion. And like, we
Mm-hmm.
tend to be very extreme in
Yeah.
how we interact with others and like what we expect from others. And like, I mean, we can lay on a lot of things really thick. Our
Can we take
behavior
it back real quick? Because
to,
I want to give them the exact translation of
yes.
brahmacharya.
Yeah.
It's abstinence or non-lusting. And this one gets a little bent out of shape because we're used to the definitions of
Sexual.
yeah, sexual, and like just, thinking of like priests where it's like they're just not allowed to have sex, period. But I think as we're getting into the topic of moderation, I think it leads to that. But I think showing it in light of sexual acts, it's just highlighting the fact of there's so much energy and passion related to that action that we can take that same amount of energy and put it into other things. So
Well,
I feel like they're showing the most acute example of what brahmacharya is.
yeah, and I feel like
And
we
we can
could do
apply it
like
to
a
other.
whole other show on this topic, but that also speaks to like why a lot of people, even in Kundalini, like people think it's about like Tantra is just about like sex and this
Right.
and that, but it's actually like harnessing that sexual
Mm-hmm.
energy, and you can direct that life force in other ways. It has nothing to do with,
Right.
just orgasm. But you just reminded me of something else too. I just literally had this conversation yesterday of, it's interesting how in a more carnal way, since we're talking about sexual energy, and a very carnal way, we can be very like lustful, and like there's just a different energy to maybe your attraction or how you express your sexual energy. And what I noticed personally is like when I started doing this work, although sexual energy wasn't my focus, that in of itself even shifted for me, where it was like, I'm not going to go, we'll go off the topic, but anyway, that type of energy shifts for you too. But
Yeah.
yeah, but in moderation, again, with people and how I express, I always think of this one as like making sure I'm not being extreme in
Mm-hmm.
my whatever that exchange is with other people.
Yeah. Since you brought the word up of tantra, I was reading something that I had written a while ago, and it brought up the definition tantra, and it literally translates into a tool that weaves or looms. So the idea of tantra with anything, it's taking the time to like really integrate things to create something.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not just about harnessing sexual energy and directing it properly. It's about taking the time to like really integrate things. And that's essentially, I think, what
But
brahmacharya is teaching.
yeah, but that's integration of our own feminine and masculine. And a lot of
Mm-hmm.
people, especially here, take that and think it's about the sexual energy between two people physically, when it really is like about that interweaving of the feminine and masculine internally. We're
Mm-hmm.
going to have to do a whole show on that.
I know, I
Let's
know.
cover that. We'll
I
do a
was
whole
gonna
sexual energy show. Woo!
Yeah, boy.
Okay,
Okay, way to get
go
off
ahead.
topic. All right, I told you that that was a very provocative yama.
Yeah.
Okay, so the last yama is aparigraha. I just realized as I'm saying aparigraha how much harder some of these words get as we go down the line, but I committed to the Sanskrit word. So
Yeah. The
aparigraha,
Sanskrit, I'm just like, oh,
what
it's
is it?
pretty. Generosity.
Yeah, non-greediness.
Yeah, one thing I think of too with that, because I think a lot of times when we hear generosity in terms of being generous to others, a lot of people feel like, oh, I don't have enough to give, or I don't have enough to share. And it's not just material, and it doesn't have to be just monetary. I mean, we could be generous with our time. You could be generous in holding space. You could be generous in prayer. You could be generous in, generosity of heart. Like there's
Mm-hmm.
so many layers of how we can be generous with each other and, showing up and supporting others. It doesn't
And
just have to be that.
yeah, and the flip side of that too is because we think like sometimes we hear generosity, we think about just giving, but part of it too is just not being closed off,
Mm-hmm.
so being open to others and to situations and just seeing how exposing yourself and who you are can shift things in a positive manner.
Oh, totally. That makes me think of like even doing the podcasting, a lot of times, people will send messages that us being open supported them in some way. So it's like our
I sure
vulnerability.
hope so.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. Yeah. But yeah, so that can be supportive. Okay. So those are the yamas.
Mm-hmm.
And then there are the niyamas. And as
The
you can see, we
niyamas.
haven't gotten into postures yet.
I know. See how much you have to do? Okay, so the niyamas are how we take care of ourselves, and the first one is saucha.
Mm-hmm. Purity.
Mm-hmm. Keep yourself clean.
Yeah. But again, multiple layers to that come up
Right.
when I think of this. I
Mm-hmm.
it makes one of the first things that comes up is I think it's in the Bible, or at least religious people say like cleanliness is godly. But
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and there are a lot of cultures where their religions like cleansing the self is very important, even before prayer or entering temple or wherever they
Mm-hmm.
worship. But purity of mind, purity of heart, again, like all these different layers of these things that really cause us to look at ourselves and
Mm-hmm.
really like question like our motivation, our intention, what space we are functioning from, thinking from, being from. Yeah.
And even quite literally, I mean, taking cleanliness, you think about how you feel about after you take a shower every day and that ritual,
Mm-hmm.
and paying attention to your physical body, taking care of this physical vessel that we have. And I think that it's very, how we take care of ourselves is almost to some degree how we take care of others or how we take care of our existence in life.
Yeah.
It's a good
But
example
I
of
like
that.
that you said the word ritual, because like for us, we may pay attention to that in the shower, but not everyone does. And that is something that I mean, is very intentional when I shower, like the cleansing process. I'm being very mindful of like the release of certain things. And like, there's something so uh, um, powerful and healing. I mean, water, I mean, it's like
Mm-hmm.
form of life force. I mean, we're primarily water. So I really do tune into the cleansing when I'm in a shower, and it is very ritualistic for me. And that does, I think, too, like even doing something small like that will bring you into being more mindful of how you take care of yourself in other ways.
Right.
I mean, some
Yeah.
people it starts with food, but whatever
Mm-hmm.
you start with, it usually will loop you into overall care.
Yeah, but it's just like when we talked about the chakras last, building that primary foundation of simple things build us into the more complex things.
Mm-hmm.
So just
Don't forget there are other layers of pure honey. Watch that mind.
yeah. Yeah.
Woo! Okay.
Okay, next up in the niyamas and santosha.
Contentment.
hmm So I know, take a breath about that one
Yeah.
because that's robust too.
Yeah.
Um, when I think about this, when I think about gratitude and being
Yes.
grateful for what it is that we actually have versus seeing that which we don't. Now, I say that, and I will tell you it's not an easy thing. It is a practice and it's a work in progress and it is discipline and it's a ritual to constantly, I think we're just designed as humans to want more and change because that's what keeps us evolving.
I will say though, in this process of whatever tools you're using for self healing, self awakening, transformation, a lot of these things just naturally start to happen.
Yeah.
You start to have these strange, like, little moments of awareness of, like, this, for example, it reminds me of years ago, I started to recognize things that would have bothered me in the past didn't bother me as much, and it was
hmm
like, wait a minute, my old response to this would have been, something really dramatic and like freaking out, where I was still just like in this state of peace and kind of like, well, and in my gratitude and really looking at making an attempt to look at things from a higher lens and to have clarity in these things. But it's interesting that, because I think when we hear a lot of these things, it sounds daunting that I'm like constantly in observation of myself, constantly having to be aware. But you don't have to try so hard. It's not like
Yeah.
this forceful thing. It's just being aware, just kind of
hmm
observing. And you will start to notice like subtle changes that make huge impacts.
And sometimes that's the practice is
Mhm.
just the observation and mindfulness of noticing the shift.
Yes.
Yeah.
Which comes to
Tapas. That's probably the
self-discipline.
easiest one. That's the easiest one of all of the.
What?
It's no, I'm sorry. Pronunciation.
Oh, oh. It's like self-discipline is easy.
Yeah,
What?
yeah, it's so easy.
Yeah.
For those of you struggling with self-discipline, get it together.
Yeah.
I'm just kidding.
I just
Yeah.
want to point out too, for uh people who may be Reiki practitioners, some of these may remind you in some ways of the Reiki principles and precepts as well. I can
Mhm.
get into that, but this one reminds me of the, I am diligent, just for today, being in my diligence. So the self-discipline, again, could be like multi-layered, multifaceted, but for me, like in the most base level, it's, again, like having that practice of being aware and choosing how you are showing up and how you are engaging, not just with yourself, but others. So it's not always the discipline of like an external practice, like I'm self-disciplined to do meditation every morning, to do yoga every day. Those are all external, which
Mhm.
are great practice. But self-discipline for me is also a very internalized thing of like your process, your inner working of how you're going to express externally.
And taking the time to understand you and noticing your behaviors, how your behaviors affect those around you or your environment or, just interactions. And then just the, I don't want to say the next one. I was about to
I know,
say
I was going to say this leads right
it.
into the next
It
one.
does. It does. So, I mean, we may as well just go
They're
there,
like
but
great,
like,
they build on each other.
yeah. So being in observance of studying yourself and knowing how you behave so that you can discipline those behaviors that may or may not be working, but you have to understand them yourself. And that takes diligence of observation and application of things that changes that you think need to be made.
Yeah. Okay, so what's the next one?
Sveti, Sveti Yaya.
Self-study.
hmm
Ah, I, it,
So
oh, go
you
ahead.
go. Okay,
No,
I'll go.
Oh,
Ready, paper, rock, scissors, shoot.
go.
Okay, okay,
I
okay.
go.
So, when I did my first yoga teacher training, I've done two. So the first one I did was about 5 years ago, and I forget what we were talking about. We had already covered the niyamas and stuff, but or maybe we were talking about it. But I had shared something that, because we were going around the room how to share something. I shared that that year I was trying to watch myself not crossing my arms over my chest, because that's just a comfortable way to hang out, and but at that time I was trying not to be so closed off. And I know, like, the body language, the action of just crossing your arms, it shuts off connection, and
Mhm.
it people you appear to people to be closed off and not approachable. So I was really making a conscious effort to not cross my arms, and it was hard because I wanted to do it all the time, and it's a protective mechanism. So I found myself doing that, and because that contradicted what I wanted to experience as far as connection with people, so I shared that, and my teacher pointed out, she's like, "Oh, that's a perfect example of Svediyaya," and I'll never forget that. And then another friend had told me, like, years later, she's like, "I'll never forget that moment when we were learning about Svediyaya and what I had said, and the application of that self-observance."
Yeah. Well, the self-observance is a big part to me of the self-study. I mean, just like even what we talked about in the other one. But another thing that stands out to me about this one is we do ingest a lot. We read a lot of books, we study, we go to a lot of classes, we do all
Mm-hmm.
this stuff. And sometimes we forget to observe ourselves in the process of it all.
Yeah.
And like really paying attention to and tuning into how these philosophies, how these practices, how these tools, what are they doing to you? Like,
Mm-hmm.
what is coming up for you? Do you feel any different? Are you noticing any shit? Like, so yeah, I think it's a really good reminder to acknowledge the
Integration.
yeah, but the effects of
Yeah.
the experiencing of all of these things. Because again,
Mm-hmm.
like, we can read the books, go to class. A lot of times people go to classes and leave and never touch whatever it was they learned again. You know what I mean? So it's
Mm-hmm.
like really allowing yourself to apply and see, like, study yourself in that process.
And that's a good point. Like I said earlier, there was some teachers I had um, contact with that just were the opposite of what I was reading.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and I was still in the early stages of integrating it into my actions and stuff. But what I was reading and then, like, what I was witnessing, I'm like, these don't seem to be going together. So of course we're human, so we're doing the best we can to kind of live our truth and not be contradictory. I mean, contradiction is kind of, it's innate in us to some degree, but the importance of applying these things to our lives and observing the experience of them versus just reading them and then preaching about them.
What you said, this is like a side note, but you reminded me of it. And I have to say this too, because I get a lot of emails from people who have experiences where they are disappointed with the classes or the teachers that they've had, because I think we have a lot of expectation that if someone is teaching us something and, like, even if someone is practicing something, that they are supposed to live a certain way and be a certain way. And we forget their humanness. You know what I mean? Like, a lot of times we put our teachers and people who are in practice on this pedestal,
Mm-hmm.
and we forget that they are also in the process as well. So it's one thing to keep in mind too, like if you are going to yoga teacher training or you're taking Reiki classes or whatever you're doing, remember that whomever you're learning from is also human, and you can learn a lot as well. Like, one of my teachers I learned a lot in observing her. It helped me. She made that click for me of like, oh, like the teachers are still working too. Like,
Yeah.
this thing doesn't end. Okay, that's.
Yeah.
So I think, anyway, you just reminded me of that.
Or if you're like me and you're reluctant to put yourself out fully as a teacher, remember that you're also human, but you still have something to teach, even if it's not perfect or complete.
Well, I think that's why I'm very comfortable with sharing and teaching, because I live by that. Like I will tell
Mm-hmm.
you out the gate, listen, I haven't perfected anything. I'm sharing with you what has helped me. I'll tell you the truth of what I've learned, but I
Mm-hmm.
am still in my process, like
Right.
10,000% all
And
day.
we all will be until the day we die.
Yeah. And
Okay.
even after that.
Yeah.
Okay.
So this is the next one. This is it. Can I get a drum roll for this? Because it's not. Isvara Pranidhana.
Mhm.
Did I do it right?
I
Isvara
don't even
Pranidhana.
attempt to do the Sanskrit. The only Sanskrit for me is Om, the end, and good night. Um, surrender to the divine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Spiritual surrender.
That one brings up for me like the dark night of the soul, really,
Oh,
because I think we all at some point in this process become very confronted with these different aspects of ourselves and like
mhm.
our old ways of being versus what we're moving into. And there can be a lot of resistance in that, a lot of fear in that. And it can be very uncomfortable until you finally do surrender. But
Yeah.
it's usually not a pretty process leading up to the surrender.
Mm-mm. No, there's a lot of ego to face, and a lot of our, I don't want to call it our dark side because it's not a dark side, it's just our shadow,
Yeah.
as we've discussed in the past. Um, and yeah, stuff that we don't really want to see about ourselves that we need to kind of move it out of the way in order to go on the path that we set down if we are choosing to follow these kind of journeys.
Yeah, and another thing too, it's also one of those things that's ongoing. So you may have this moment of epiphany and this moment of surrender that feels like you just were bathed in love and like, oh my God, this is it. It feels so good. And then something else down the line may surface and send you right back into that opportunity to surrender again. So,
Mm-hmm.
with all of these things, just keep in mind you're not going to get like, there's not going to be a day where you get a gold star and like you've graduated from Satya. Like, no, like
Yeah.
we're constantly in practice and
Yeah.
constantly given opportunities to work through all of these.
Yeah. Much to my dismay, there's no certificates that come along with achieving any of
I
these
know, I
things.
know you would love that, honey, wouldn't you?
Just tell me I did it and I did it right.
Yeah. So after these is where asana comes in. So
Yes. So
shall
after all that,
we? Yeah.
so if you're not doing all of this before you go to your yoga class today, maybe you should. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. Imagine. You're not allowed in this yoga class until we see your yama niyama certificates.
Oh my God.
What a world it would be like if
Honey,
that was it, right?
classes
Okay.
would shrink.
Oh
Okay,
my
go
God.
ahead.
Yeah. Asanas. Those, yeah, asanas. These are the postures.
Those are, yeah, the postures, which in the West, like yoga is very commonly known
Mm-hmm.
for. But what I found so interesting about them in yoga teacher training was learning that they are really meant to help us master the body, but even more to help prepare us for meditation.
That's the only thing the postures are for.
I was like, what?
Only thing that yoga postures are for are to condition our muscles and bones to sit upright for a long amount of time to clear our mind. That's it. That's,
Preparing you to meditate.
that's all it's for.
Yeah.
Sorry to whoever bubbles we burst just now, but
I
hopefully you
just think
saw.
it's really interesting.
Yeah.
But then we can't help. She's a Scorpio. Sorry, real. Okay, don't take it personally. No,
Yeah, I'm
she's like
sorry.
totally joking.
I am very passionate about this topic.
Yeah, but yeah, so like mastery of the body and preparing yourself to be able to sit. I mean, it's interesting too when you think about um, the postures. That's one of the things I like about hatha because you have to like hold a pose and kind of breathe into it for a while. And it's interesting how much discipline, self-connection, self-awareness, all this it takes just to hold a posture that seems so simple, really, like tree
Yeah.
pose.
Yeah.
And I'm not talking about advanced tree, like lifting your leg and that, no, just standing.
Yeah.
Like what? And like engaging your core and all of these things. It's just amazing. Like,
Yeah, there's so much to it. Just, I mean, taking the mind out of it, but just being so connected with your body that you know how to like stand up straight,
yeah,
like tucking your tailbone so that your spine is properly aligned, so that pushing your head back a little bit so that your neck is over your shoulders the way it should be. Because, life conditions, especially our society where we're sitting in cars or at desks all day and our shoulders roll forward, our head rolls forward, like our muscles have now been conditioned to adapt to that formation. And when you stand in mountain pose, all those things are stacked, and what it takes for you to even know in your mind what standing up properly feels like.
But that's the thing, like it helps you to really be aware of being in body in alignment. Because
Yeah.
I think a lot of times when we think of alignment, we use that term a lot in energy healing, like chakra alignment and all of this, blah, blah, blah. And what I teach people is the importance of, I call it finding your seat, like just your physical alignment, even standing, like standing posture. It's crazy how much it shifts your energy, your alertness, your awareness, just being in physical alignment. So yeah, the asanas are pretty amazing.
Oh God, there's so much more to talk about.
No, we can't. We got to go.
I know, but
What's
I
the
want
next one?
to. Well, can we, since we're in asana, can we touch on chakras here, or should we do it somewhere else?
We'll do it after we get through the rest of these.
Okay, fine. We can't forget because we promised.
We won't. No, we won't.
Okay.
Joe, we got you.
Yeah. The next one is pranayama.
The reason I took yoga teacher training.
Yes. Breathing. It's just breathing.
Breathing and learning how to manage and control your life force. Yeah. And one of the things.
Not that easy.
No.
It's breathing, but it's not that easy.
Well, this is the thing that's so interesting about the breath, right? You do it automatically anyway. It's something you can do mindlessly. But once you learn how to tune into the flow of your life force, you can actually shift, again, like your awareness, you can shift your energy, you can shift a lot of things. And it sounds so basic, like, oh, focus on the breath. But it reminds me of, I tell people of, like when you're hyperventilating and you have to breathe in a certain way to like calm your body down, or when we're stressed out or someone, you see them freaking out, one of the first things we say just like intuitively is like, take a breath, come on, breathe through it. The breath and managing and the flow of our life force, again, is like one of those things that is a powerful part of our design.
Well, and we're constantly talking about adaptation, right? And our physical bodies are masterminds of keeping us alive, and they will adapt. And where our society, with everything we do, how much is demanded of us every day, the overstimulation of just even a computer, like the lights into our eyes and social media, like all of this overstimulation, our breathing adapts to that in order to keep us alive. And then we move into fight or flight, like all this stuff. So we've taken our physical bodies to this new level of adaptation that we forget that we can control our breath, and we forget what the breath can actually do to our physical form just by breathing properly. I mean, it's crazy. But again, we're not studying how we're integrated with our physical body, and we're just mindlessly letting it do what it does. We forget how much of our life force we can control.
Yeah. I mean, I love it because it helps me come into presence, like breathing in a particular way, or shifting my consciousness. If I'm like tuning into my intuition, I breathe a different way. Like there are so many ways that, I mean, the breath. Okay. I know we got to
shoot. Okay. Next, after control of life force, it's pratyahara.
Yeah, and these next ones all kind of, they're similar, but this one reminds me more of like focusing on your internal process, like really being an observer of your own emotion or your own, like whatever is coming up for you internally. So back to that deep self-connection for internal observation.
Yeah, it's a withdrawal of the senses. So knowing that the five senses that we have externally, if we take them internally and tune into what's going on inside there with those same senses.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. The next 3 or 4, I feel like are people kind of group
like
them in.
Slightly different.
But they pull them apart because they're things that need to be mastered. And to do all in one can get very confusing, very challenging. So these are just like layers of it. So after pratyahara is dharana.
Yeah. So after the practice of just observing your internal workings, this one brings you into a singular focus and like managing, like directing the mind is the way like I think of it. And this one, I think of the practice of like chanting, like a mantra or something like that, or when you learn yoga or meditation and they tell you to focus on the breath, like it's giving you, like, you're starting to now train yourself to manage so you don't have like monkey mind.
Yeah.
And learning to focus on a singular thing can really help you in that process.
Yeah. So concentration, there's a lot of meditations start with just sitting and staring at one flame.
Mm-hmm.
And it's trying to tune in that concentration. But when you were talking earlier, I don't know why this came up, but I pictured like when you first start to ride a bicycle, like you have this destination and you're trying to get there, but when you're first riding, you might be like all over the map, like going side to side on the sidewalk or falling all over, but
I
you're
drove
trying.
into a parked bus.
You drove into a parked bus. Sorry, I don't mean to laugh, but that's hilarious. And I also have a very visual mind, so um, so she got to her destination and stopped right there. But as you practice riding your bicycle, you start to streamline that all over the place riding into this one straight line.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of like our concentration's all over the place at first, but as we work on concentrating, we get to this one singular focus.
That is a beautiful visual, and you just reminded me of something as well. I don't know why it's coming to share, but there was this woman who came to me for Reiki training like a year or so ago, and her and a friend, and she was 80, which was super impressive. I mean, this is when she's coming. I was like, whoa, how cool. Like but anyway, there was something that came up with her, and it was interesting seeing like that very kind of same image of like, we live our lives, and it's like, imagine like if our mind started out like this. It makes me think of like chords that are like all intertwined, like we're here, like we're one, focused, balanced, and we start to live and everything starts to fray. And like we are sending energies and parts of our minds all over the place. And then we reach a certain point where we feel so disconnected and out of our routine, because now, like she's in retirement and, everything else. And then you're just kind of like, it feels very disconnected, disjointed. And then there is this process of, again, like, oh, I got to rein it all in, like coming back into me.
Yeah.
So your visual just reminded me of that, because that was a message.
I follow you
for her. Yeah. Okay. So then what?
So after we concentrate, and we move into dhyana.
Mm-hmm.
Dhyana,
Fully
dhyana.
aware without focus. Now this one I think is interesting, because this is definitely one of those ones I think it's easier to experience than to articulate.
Yeah.
And again, like all things, comes with practice. So in the previous steps, it's almost like, imagine you're training your mind. You're training yourself to be able to direct the mind, to direct your focus, but it's taking effort. So the effort may be that you're chanting a mantra. The effort may be that you're consciously focusing on the breath. But as you continue to practice, it's like you kept using that map to get to this spot, and then now you're just there. You don't need the map anymore. That's the best way I can describe it.
I've learned about dhyana as meditation also. And I think we've discussed this as well. When talking about meditation, people have a hard time because they're like, oh, I can't get my mind to shut up. But the same idea is where you can just like sit. If your mind is the sky and you see clouds going by, like you're aware of them, but you just let them go because you're in the present moment. And so these other things, where back in dharana, maybe you're concentrating on that one cloud as it moved and you focused on just that. Now you can sit and see the clouds move, but not attached to any of them, but just be aware of everything that's present at that moment.
It reminds me of that saying that we always hear in this that can be annoying, of like, just be.
Yeah. You just be.
You just be.
I am already.
Honey, just be. The end.
Yeah. Super easy.
But to go back to step one, and you see how it's a progression. It unfolds. Okay. And finally.
So finally, everything that we have been working towards, we work towards samadhi.
This reminds me.
That's what it feels like.
Yes, right?
That deep breath.
It reminds me of that, like, whew.
Yeah.
It reminds me of like that conscious awareness of being connected to all things. And this is something that I personally can't imagine being constantly aware of. I mean, like, yeah, you're aware of it. Like I could be like, oh, I'm connected to Tiffany, and oh, I'm connected to the tree and the bamboo plant next to me. But in meditation or even in energy work, there have been experiences where you feel it. I mean, it's
Yeah.
like, it is something that I don't even know. You can't even put it into words, but you have the experience of oneness. But in my experience so far, it has been moments,
Yeah.
moments that I come out of, and then I'm right back here,
Yeah.
like engaged in this realm of consciousness. So, yeah, I mean, I think it is something that you can learn to sustain or elongate. For me, so far, it's only been in moments of like a meditative state where I can experience it for more than like a, but in terms of just living that in that knowingness and like truly feeling of connectedness to all things, whew,
Yeah.
man, I can't even imagine what that would be like.
Yeah. I don't know who or what has done it. I mean, I don't know. My mind just went in 15 different ways. I'm trying to dharana my mind. Um, but I don't even know that I could call it samadhi, but I've had experiences where, specifically in meditation, or maybe even one time at a friend's wedding when we were all drunk and dancing, like, I don't know, but that was significantly influenced as well. So it's probably not it, but just this feeling of like such joyous lightness that you do feel connected to everything, and everything is just this abundant joy and bliss, that you forget about everything else that our mind wants to interpret in the experience.
Yeah, I just thought of too the time I told this story a long time ago on the podcast that we talked. I don't remember what our topic was, so I'm not going to like tell the story again. But I think probably the most dramatic experience for me was that time where I read something that was like super duper racist and violent, and I
Oh, mm-hmm.
gave myself the chance to try to connect and see beyond that, like the whole light and everything. Yeah, and that, I mean, that was probably like one of those moments, those blips of like, holy shit. Like, I mean, just the
Yeah.
awareness of like, oh my God, like we are so much more than these bodies, these personalities, our
Mm-hmm.
teachings, are this and that. And we are literally like, we're all it, just
Yeah.
singularly it. Like, yeah, that was
What a great
mind
example,
blowing.
I think, to um, challenge people with trying to understand that concept, to find something that really triggers you or really pushes your button in the complete opposite wrong direction,
Yep.
and to be able to come out of that. Like, that is such a pathway to everything that we're talking about.
And to see your connection to that
Yeah.
thing. Yeah.
Right.
That, I
Yeah.
mean, it was mind blowing.
And of
So
course, sometimes the most extreme examples are what get us closest to that which we're trying
totally.
to see.
Yeah. No,
Yeah.
yeah. And so these 8 limbs, I mean, they're really like disciplines and practices for us. So
Mm-hmm.
again, like yoga in of itself, I mean, we talked about how the postures come in and how the breath comes in, but I mean, when you look at the full picture of the system, I mean, it's amazing of how much it can help us to heal and transform and expand and evolve. And
Mm-hmm.
it's just amazing.
It really is.
Okay, so chakras.
Chakras.
Maybe we'll touch on it and maybe go deeper into it in our community discussion next week. Is that
Oh
fair?
yeah.
Because we
Yeah,
spent a lot of time on the eightfold path.
we did. But there's so much more about the Eightfold Path I want to
I
talk
know,
about.
I know. But we
I'm
literally have
not done yet.
been like here for an hour.
I
Thank you for staying
know.
with us.
Yeah.
Okay.
Um, yeah, so yoga and the chakras, how do they align with each other? Well, we talked the past podcast about chakras and how they're energy systems of our body, and they have different um, characteristics and jobs in our everything. Um, but as we just talked about, all the 8 limbs kind of touch on everything that the chakras represent in our personalities and in our experience.
Right.
So as simplistic as it can be, I think that the physical, are we talking about postures or are we talking about yoga now? Now I confused
Well,
myself. The
well, this
postures
does.
alone, I
Okay.
think, help align our physical, the energies of our physical being, so that it smooths out the energy so that we can have a greater focus.
But I think if we go backwards, this will kind of help it. So,
Okay,
like,
great.
when you think about chakras and we're thinking about the consciousness that we're streaming, like the energies that we're holding and how we're holding energies in our body, what we're projecting out. And so when we tie that into yoga, because we often think of balancing our chakras,
Mm-hmm.
just like we talked about in the last series. And I think with yoga, again, looking at all the steps that we talked about, including the asanas and including pranayama, that is naturally by design going to help you not just balance your chakra energy, but balance your entire beingness. So I
Mm-hmm.
think the chakras, in a lot of ways, again, can give us some insight. We can learn to tune into our chakras to have understanding around the energies that we hold. And through the practices of yoga, some of those energies become more amplified, they start to surface, they come into balance. There's like, so it's all interwoven. It's kind of like the chakra energy projects out for your understanding, and yoga helps you to bring those energies into balance or bring certain energies into your awareness. So I guess it's, thinking of it that way, it's kind of like hard to separate any of it because it's
Yeah.
all part of the system that is you, really.
Right. Yeah.
One thing I wanted to say about that really quick, this is one of the books I had to have in yoga teacher training. It's called Hatha Yoga Illustrated. And the reason I wanted to show this to you guys is because it has in here the different postures, but it also tells you the benefits of the postures. Oh, I took notes in here. It has benefits of the postures, what your drishti should be. Drishti is like where you focus your eyes on. It has counter poses for it, the physical and mental benefits, but I believe it also in here somewhere talks about chakra energy as well. So if you are very curious about like, oh, what posture is good for what, and like, oh, my heart chakra is blocked, what should I do? You know,
Mm-hmm.
sometimes things like this, or even looking up the different postures, they'll give you detail of um, what they're helping you to work on.
Mm-hmm.
That's all I had to say about that.
A lot of information out there.
There's so much. And the system of yoga too, again, like depending on what type of yoga, like hatha, I think is really cool because it is about balancing, like the feminine and masculine. Like the word alone, the ha is related to the sun and the is related to the moon. And I mean, it's literally like a system of balancing. But sun and moon, should we mention the Ida, Pingala, and
Yeah.
Sushumna really quick?
Yeah. So the idea of the chakra system and just our energy systems, that there's a line of energy called the Sushumna in the center of our torso. It's kind of how the 7 major chakras align. And then around the Sushumna, there's 2 other lines of energy, one that goes up, one that goes down, the Ida and the Pingala. And the Ida is feminine, and it both start in the root.
Cooling.
What?
Cooling.
Cooling, yes. And then the Pingala is male. It's so the right side, it's the sun, it's heating. So both of them start at the root chakra and then work their way up, wrapping around the Sushumna. And the Ida ends in the left nostril, and the Pingala ends in the right nostril. So coming back to pranayama, if anybody has studied some of this breath work, there is a pranayama where you do alternate nostril breathing. So there's something to that as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. Closing one nostril and then the other.
And so I was trying to see if there was a picture of it in this book, but there's not. But one of the things too, if you're wondering like what it is she's talking about, it's often what you see depicted when you see pictures of like chakra bodies or chakra energy or even kundalini, where you see that picture of like a person in lotus, and then you see it looks like the
DNA, the double helix.
yeah, but what is it called?
Oh,
The caduceus.
caduceus.
Caduceus, yeah.
Yeah.
So when you see that, and then you see a line up the the spine, that's the image of the Ida Pingala. And
The caduceus is the symbol that we often see with medical stuff. It's like
Mhm.
the two snakes going up the center staff with the wings at the top.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And then this is a good book,
Mm.
The Yoga of the Bhagavad Gita. If you're interested in taking in some information along with your practice, along with all of this. And we are going to be here next week to talk about community discussion. And I know because Tiffany's head is going to explode. She loves yoga. So I'm sure we will go into more detail. I'm sure she's going to make sure that we go into more detail then about
It'll be a It'll be a 3-hour live session.
yeah,
I'm just
right?
kidding. I'm just kidding. I've
We
got like
won't
eight
put a
jobs
cap
to
on it.
do. I've got 8 jobs to do on Wednesday. I can only
Yeah.
have 1 hour.
Yeah. So we'll talk about more depth about yoga and the chakras. And in fact, if you can even be more detailed about what you want to know about that, because it's kind of, just let us know, like what about the yoga and the chakras specifically,
Mm-hmm.
would you like more discussion around?
Or maybe this
And
conversation brought up a bunch of other things, questions you didn't know you even had. So
yeah,
something that may have arisen that you need more clarification on getting deeper into the subject, we'd love to hear about it.
absolutely. And what did you think of the Eightfold Path, and have you heard of it? And man, it's pretty amazing.
It
Yeah,
really is.
we covered a lot.
We did. I love it
If
so
your
much.
head is spinning, let us know.
Yeah.
So as always, we are so thankful to all of you. We will have bonus content for our Patreons around this. We haven't discussed what it is yet, but
No, we
we will
haven't.
have it there for you. We'll also, of course, have our Dear Diaries there, which
Mm-hmm.
she is probably gonna have you there for an hour, and because she loves
My
yoga. Like
my
I'm
dear
teasing,
diary
she
is just gonna
loves
be
it.
like you watching me meditate for an hour.
Yeah,
I'm just
let's
kidding.
do yoga together.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the patrons, you guys have a lot more coming around
Mm-hmm.
this, and hopefully that will be useful for you as well. But we are really looking forward to our community discussion next week, and we thank you always for
Yes.
being here with us.
Yes. Thank you for being here and thank you for your support and your contributions. That's it.
Okay.
Au revoir.
Au revoir.